So we're going to present to you some of the results of the ResPaDon Project, which is a project that was led by the BNF, the National Library of France, and the University of Lille, with the other partners that you see up on the screen here. And specifically, we're looking at the results of the experimental access point that was installed and tested at the University of Lille. So we are in the second and final year of the experimental phase of the project, and this project grew out of the desire to broaden uses, specifically research uses, of BNF web archives, and to make it easier for researchers to get started using web archives. So one of the main goals of this project was to develop a network, so not limited to just the BNF and Paris, but with other partners. And at the University of Lille, we were very happy to host and test this remote access point. And we are at the end of 1 year of tests of the access to the web archives with the tools and services that go along with it. And so we're going to be presenting this experimentation, what exactly it was, and what we learned in terms of tools and accompaniment and research uses.
Thank you. So maybe as a start, we speak about a remote, single remote access point, but in fact, this is a really multifaceted service, and this is what we want to present to you today. So first, to make this experiment possible, we had to find a contractual solution compatible with the legal restrictions. Yeah, thank you. Because web archives are legal deposit collections, so they are accessible only within the library premises and in the premises of 26 regional libraries with whom we share the legal deposit of printing companies. So on the top of the framework agreement of the ResPaDon Project, BNF and the University of Lille actually signed an application agreement which contains the description of the experiment, but specifically extends BNF premises in 2 specific locations of the University of Lille, and that you see on the screen. Tester also had to sign a charter of responsibilities, which commit them to respect the condition of use of the system, of course, and also the web archives. So mainly that was okay for citation, and reuse for research implies right holders' permissions. 2 laptops were used for the experiments because rooms were not fully dedicated full-time to hosting the remote access point, and library spaces are precious. From a technical point of view, we set up a VPN, so a virtual private network system, which provides access to BNF servers through a local web browser. And we used a technology that's called Walix Bastion. It's a French piece of software that enables people from Lille that are actually register into our internal directory to access our services remotely. And because we have a security manager and he is very concerned about security, we also had to double this authentication process with a smartphone application which generates single-use tokens at each connection. Once identified, user can access what we call a capsule, which contains a full environment, so a Linux, Ubuntu system, software, tools, and data to work with the web archives. So very precisely in this archive, we give access to our whole 1.8 petabyte archive covering more than 20 years of data. Through our Archive de l'Internet, so Open Wayback application. We also give access to full text, through full text to 4 topical collections that we have indexed, and specifically within the framework of this experiment, we give access to different tools we've been testing for text and data mining, for image search, and for data visualization. So we included WAC files, but also derivatives and metadata in different formats. And as we were not focusing on specific needs, neither on specific researcher profiles, we decided to put different types of tools and different types of data in tester hands so that we could get feedback from them and also use cases from their usage. We set up a portal that you see on the screen to facilitate access to all this material, and we chose a collection which is the very first collection that we built in-house at BNF 20 years ago for the presidential and parliamentary election. A key tool in this capsule is Solar Wayback, which is a powerful discovery tool to simply search by keyword or for image search, or to view results in different ways, such as link graphs, workload, or curve. Another tool that we've just spoke about today is our Archive Unleashed toolkit. We generated derivatives from the collection. We translated into French the Archive Unleashed notebook and adapted them to the collections and to the environment constraints, so mainly size constraints, and also we wanted to offer only real-time execution capabilities, so we have also to take care of that, which led us to generate some samples out of these derivatives. And we also generated a bunch of metrics that we used to do to characterize our collection. So general indicators, list of domains, MIME types, response codes, and we included these too. And last but not least, we also worked on documentation in several directions. So documentation on the collection itself, its content, but its production context, the tools, how they work, but also guided step-by-step examples, and also the remote access system itself. We also provided general information about web archiving and reassemble documentation we had on previous research projects using web archive to drive to use cases. We tested several formats for the documentation and size. So either print, digital, in the form of web pages, websites, or PDFs, and both some were in the capsule and some were outside the capsule. And that's all for the content of the capsule, and I'll hand it over to Jennifer.
So the mediation and outreach, the goal was, like I said at the beginning, to make it easier for researchers getting started using web archives generally for the first time. So the mediation was really one of the unique points of this project. We had in-person mediation in the libraries in two of the libraries of the University of Lille, so as close as possible to the research departments. We had a team of 6 mediators. I'm one of them. And we were just interested non-experts. And so 2 years ago, I didn't know anything at all about web archives, and it's been very interesting working with the BNF and learning about this. So the group of 6 mediators, we had 2 training sessions of 2 days each where our colleagues from the National Library came up to Lille and presented various aspects of web archives and gave us exercises so we could get comfortable using them. And then at the end of the training sessions, the mediators themselves created the presentation that we would use with everyone who came in to try out the remote access point so that we were really comfortable using with it because it was from our point of view. And then we accompanied the researchers who came in. And so how it worked was they made an appointment in one of the 2 libraries. We met with them. We asked a few introductory questions to kind of understand their profile. And then we did our presentation, which we thought originally it's 10, 15 minutes. It was never 10 or 15 minutes because they always had tons of questions. So it was really much more of an exchange, kind of guided by what we had included in our presentation. But that worked really well to get them the information that they really needed to have. And then after the exchange, we gave them pretty much as much free time as they wanted to try out accessing the web archives and using the tools. And then at the end of each session, we took a few minutes to get some feedback from them, like which features did you use and any comments on usability, what was missing specifically. And that allowed us to incrementally improve the services that we were offering. The documentation in particular became more and more detailed over the course of the project. So one of the questions that came up right away was, how far do we go in accompanying the researchers? Because we are just a group of non-experts who have 4 days of training plus some practice. And so what we included in the presentation was, what is this project? What is a remote access point? What are web archives and how are they collected? What are these tools? And in theory, what can you do with them? And then some information about legal aspects, use and reuse. So there were some questions that went beyond what we could answer. Anything that went too much into detail on the technical aspects of collection, we're not involved in that, and so that's not something we could really answer. Legal questions that went too far, or the tools, we could really explain the kinds of things that you can do with them and show them some examples. But if they needed help troubleshooting, why am I not getting the results that I wanted, we'd be more referring them to the documentation that we had. And questions that we really couldn't answer, we could contact our colleagues at the BNF. But honestly, pretty much everyone who came in to try it out was using web archives for the first time and had never even really thought about using them before. And the level of training and experience that we had was enough to answer most of the questions and really help researchers start to project themselves in what kind of research questions they may be able to use in the future now that they know that this resource exists and is accessible to them at their university. So we also did outreach, of course, to try to reach the researchers at the University of Lille who might be interested in using web archives but weren't yet familiar with it. We had a large, fairly conventional communication strategy, digital communication, targeted communication, reaching out to researchers who, based on what they've researched in the past, might be particularly likely to be interested, and in-person communication as well, presentations and meetings, attending other events at research labs, and then taking the opportunity to bring up web archives if the opportunity arose. We also had some privileged contacts in some of the research labs who we encouraged, to talk about it with the researchers that they worked with. So what we found was that for this source that is so complex and outside of this conference, really not very well known, it was in-person communication that really worked for convincing people to come in and try out the web archive. So I do think that all of the communication channels were necessary. So by the time we met them and said, oh, you work on online political communications, there are internet archives that might really be of interest to you. At that point, they'd already seen several messages go by about web archives. And they said, oh yeah, I didn't follow up, but I did see that and I thought that might be interesting. Some things that we might like to try in the future in terms of outreach and communication are kind of flash demos, which was something that we got to try out at the closing conference for ResPaDon, where the people who attended the conference could come over the lunch break. We had a couple computers set up and they could just try out the web archives for 5-10 minutes. And there were the mediators there who were there to answer their questions. And so we think in the future, if we can find the legal framework that would allow us to do that at other events, it just helps people really see in real time, what exactly is this resource, and give it a try. We also thought that we would talk a bit more about teaching applications of web archives, because most researchers also teach. We focused entirely on research and how you can use this in your research project, but a lot of people were interested in how can I use it in my teaching as well. And the last thing is more outreach specifically to groups of young researchers at the beginning of projects. So new PhD students, new postdocs who are really the most open to trying new sources, new methodologies, particularly when they know it's something that's not widely used. So if they use that, they're definitely going to be doing original research. I'll hand it to Dorothée.
Thank you, Jennifer. So what were the lessons learned from this experimentation, those tests, and how did they impact our roadmap for the coming years? So first, let me come back on testers' profiles and expectations. So master's students, doctoral students, and researchers came to test the remote access point. They came from various disciplines, as you can see, sociology, information and communication science, but also oceanography or medieval history. Some of them were already familiar with the tools used in the digital humanities. Some of them already knew web archives, some other didn't. Some came with precise research questions. Other, mostly doctoral students, came to discover a new source, see what it looked like, and if it could be of any use in their research. The master students came with homework to do and a question to answer in very limited time, so that was sometimes very challenging. And so one of the major lessons learned from those tests is that pedagogical uses were at least as important as research uses. So we were expecting researchers, but as you know, a lot of them are also teachers. And what they wanted most, or some of them, was to bring their students in the capsule and teach them a new resource. And so students were asked, for example, to compare our web archives collections with press databases on a particular subject, or they were asked to understand the main characteristics of web archives and the questions, the methodological questions arising when using them. It was the first time that we offered so many different tools in a secured remote environment. And the second lesson learned is that it was very challenging. So we had a lot of insights on improvement to make regarding the ergonomy of this environment. Some of them are very obvious, like we need a bigger screen, since as you can imagine, using Solar Wayback Toolbox within a remote display, so with a very small useful screen, is quite difficult. We also need to build a more robust, secured environment with a better articulation between all the tools we are offering. And another remark that came out very, very often was that we really need a more intuitive copy and paste feature, and we need a screen capture plugin also. We also came out with guidelines for tools improvement. So as far as the Open Wayback version we are using at the BNF is concerned, quality of navigation and captures, ergonomy were greatly appreciated. But the user wanted to, of course, do full text search on all collections, or at least have some more tools to find URLs on a particular topic. Solar Wayback, the Ngram, the image search were also highly appreciated. We had a lot of questions about how to interpret the result, how is the ranking working, and so we assumed that maybe more in-depth documentation and a French language interface would be helpful regarding this subject. Users also wanted to have the ability to customize the data viz and, for example, to change timescale and to be able to see evolutions per week or months and not only per years. And regarding the derived data that we generated with the Archives Unleashed toolkit and the Jupyter notebooks we offered, testers wanted to work at scale on the collection, which was not possible, especially with full text. And they also wanted more in-depth use cases regarding the 2002 collection. So what's next? The final goal of this experimentation was to formulate recommendations and to build reproducible examples of services built around a digital collection. The network approach that we have chosen and the partnership with the University of Lille have proven to be very relevant to encourage researchers' engagement with web archives. We have good reason to believe that the legal framework is going to evolve, and it will allow for a ResPaDon Plus. It means for deploying more access points in other French universities. So in this perspective, we have two main items on our roadmap. The first one is to build an open access educational and research sandbox to facilitate the mediation. The tests have shown us that offering documentation and metadata inside the capsule was not enough, that we needed to, researchers wanted to prepare their research before coming. So we would offer copyright-free corpora, gather all the documentation in the same place on the internet, and allow for collaborative enrichment by the network of universities. And we would also allow advanced exploration services based on metadata and derivatives that are copyright-free. And the second point is to build collaborative corpora with the research departments of the university so that they could contribute to the selections in their expertise field. And we would then deploy advanced tools in a second phase on those corpora that they have built with us. That's it. So thank you very much for your attention.